I'm Nima Rajan. About 3 million doses of Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds will be shipped to Canada now that Health Canada has approved the shots. The agency's chief medical advisor, Dr. Supriya Sharma, says this is another tool in the fight against COVID-19, and it would allow children to safely return to activities they have missed in the last 20 months. The provinces are poised and ready to start administering doses as soon as they arrive. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization is recommending 2 doses with at least 8 weeks between them. As of November 30th, fully vaccinated Canadians and permanent residents who are visiting the U.S. for less than 72 hours won't need a molecular test for COVID-19 in order to return home. The Public Health Agency of Canada also says that by the end of the month, travelers who receive the Sinopharm, Sinovac, and Covaxin vaccines will be considered fully vaccinated for travel purposes. Travelers who are out of the country for more than 72 hours, however, will still be required to present a negative molecular test at the border on their way home. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrives back in Ottawa from the Three Amigos Summit in Washington today with little to show for his efforts. Mr. Trudeau didn't make much headway trying to defuse an escalating dispute, and it was over President Joe Biden's plans to encourage Americans to buy more electric vehicles. Mr. Biden's proposed tax incentive for new electric car buyers would kneecap Canada's auto industry. This is because it focuses on selling American-made vehicles built with American union labor. The federal government is sending military personnel and equipment to BC to help areas hit hard by flooding. A contingent of soldiers are building a levee to hold back surging river water that is threatening the low-lying Sumas Prairie area near Abbotsford. Conditions are not as soggy across northern BC, but Environment Canada says up to 30 centimeters of snow will fall by Sunday. It is warning North Coast residents that the snow will turn to heavy rain on Sunday and Monday, potentially causing flooding. Data compiled by the Canadian Press shows at least 1 million doses of Canada's COVID-19 vaccine supply have gone to waste. Adam Houston, who works with Doctors Without Borders, says that is very concerning when 47% of the world's population remains without a first dose. He says a dose sitting in a freezer, ticking toward expiry, is not what should be happening. CP's survey indicates at least 2.6% of the entire supply delivered to the provinces and territories has been wasted. The Canadian Medical Association says legislation and responsible management of social media platforms are needed. This to ensure the safety of healthcare workers in the face of continuing online harassment. It is asking the federal government to deliver on a campaign promise. It was to introduce new criminal sanctions for those who intimidate or harass healthcare workers. This as well as for anyone blocking access to vaccine clinics, hospitals, testing centers, and abortion clinics. CMA President Dr. Catherine Smart is also urging Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to address harassment and threats made against health professionals. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney is dealing with rising discontent from within as the United Conservative Party's annual general meeting begins today in Calgary. 22 constituency associations are demanding a leadership review in the next 3 months. Political scientists expect the meeting is going to turn into a debate on Mr. Kenney's leadership. A backlog in drive tests is causing problems for firefighters in a northern Ontario municipality. Central Manitoulin says only 12 of its 38 firefighters have the license needed to drive a fire truck. 6 more are trying to get the DZ license, but the chief of the volunteer-run fire department says the earliest they can book the test is next spring due to the COVID-19 pandemic causing delays in booking tests. Quebec Health Minister Christian Dubé says the government wants to have children aged 5 to 11 inoculated with 1 dose of COVID-19 vaccine by Christmas. The health minister says he will announce details on the plan to vaccinate kids sometime next week. He added that the government is waiting on the province's immunization committee for guidance. Meanwhile, Quebec is reporting 745 new COVID-19 cases today and 2 more deaths attributed to COVID-19. New Brunswick's 211 helpline has been upgraded to help callers experiencing family, intimate partner, or sexual violence. The 211 helpline navigators, who respond directly to callers, received comprehensive training last month and can now direct callers to the appropriate community and social resources. Tammy Scott Wallace, who is the minister responsible for women's equality, says the COVID-19 pandemic has made accessibility to information even more important, as some survivors are further isolated from resources. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break on the Forum Daily. We'll be right back. Restaurant operators in BC's southern interior are scrambling after desperately needed supply chains were cut off by flooding and landslides. And they're not the only ones, as key transport routes to other provinces, such as Alberta, have also been affected. Yesterday, Federal Transport Minister Omar Alghabra said he met virtually with industry officials. This in an effort to get British Columbia's crippled supply chains up and running as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, a Vancouver area transportation company is providing support through storing products inside their warehouses until routes are open again. 18 Wheels Logistics says every day of disruption needs up to 4,000 square feet of extra storage space. Well, joining us now to talk more on the situation in BC at this time is Mr. Amir Abduladzadeh, the General Manager of 18 Wheels Logistics. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So let's start with a brief picture of what's happening on the ground in BC in terms of logistics and supply chains.
Well, first of all, before I start, I want to express our condolences and sympathy with some who have been impacted by this, I believe, storm and flood. And our heart goes out to them and their families. As you know, after COVID, the bottleneck got created in Asia, got moved to North America. We've been dealing with that for past 12 months to 13 months. But now this is a new level of challenges that we are facing with. And this is all started with the insufficient capacity in West Coast comparing to what was coming from Asia. And all those cargo got stuck in particularly in China and Vietnam. And it got a little bit better. We saw some improvement, but now closure of roads and getting disconnected from the rest of Canada is I think I have never seen it working in this industry for 25 years.
And how is all of this affecting operations at your company in particular?
Well, at one point we want to help out with our customers because they're moving their cargoes, and there's so much capacity that we can utilize, and we are not the only one. I guess every logistic companies in West Coast is been facing it, but lack of roads, because you ship your cargo to the to eastern part through rail or road, but not having neither of those two routes is definitely impacting, and we have a huge backlog influx of loads coming in, and as you mentioned, we end up offloading them, and until there's a better solution, we have to store those goods or stack those containers.
And how would you say all of this is impacting supply chains and businesses in Alberta, which we know your company is connected to as well?
Yes, because we are essential services, so we've been operating even during the COVID because we move perishable, we fruits and meat either from Alberta to BC and for export, or from California to BC to Alberta. So definitely we have seen the impact, because we have loads that we can't dispatch, and we have trucks in Alberta that are sitting and they can't cross because obviously there's no rail and the rails are closed. So yeah, that definitely is something we've never seen before.
Now, we know a couple of or a number of Canadian transport trucks are being rerouted throughout the U.S. Are there any alternative routes that your company are able to use at this time?
Absolutely. From last night, when we heard our Chief Operating Officer, Michael, we came up with some solution and we dispatched some load through US. But as you know, there's some area in Washington also been impacted. Some of the truck had to go all the way to Oregon coming back. So it sounds easy, but it's not, because also this flood has impacted our neighbors, Washington and other states as well.
And given the importance and expansive reach of the Port of Vancouver itself, how would you say these disruptions are likely going to impact supply chains across the country?
Well, I can see, because I look at our report in our system and I see that we are picking up those containers from the port. We see more vessels arriving to the port. They're offloading them, but there's imbalance of what we get from the port and what we can ship. And at one point, I believe either today or tomorrow, we cannot pick up any more container from the port because obviously we can offload so much and we can stack so many containers. And given the challenges we have in West Coast with limited space and when it comes to industrial warehousing, is just is something that, as I said, I've never seen it before, and it requires. I'm glad that government has intervened and have sent their army engineers to Abbotsford, and they're trying to open up the road. And we are hoping at least we can get to Kelowna because we have a lot of. We have some partners in there. We can get the goods to Kelowna. We could probably find a way to cross them to Alberta, but we are using US already.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told reporters that he checked off a number of issues that he wanted to discuss with his American counterpart Joe Biden at Thursday's North American Trilateral Summit. That included concerns about a proposed electric vehicle tax credit, Buy American rhetoric, and the cross-border Line 5 oil pipeline. Mr. Trudeau said the Americans are very aware of Canada's concerns and the threats that the proposed tax credit poses to decades of integrated North American automaking. With us to talk more about the Three Amigos Summit is former International Trade Minister, the Honourable Stockwell Day. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thanks, Nima. Good to be with you.
Now, before we begin on the summit, let's talk about what's making headlines across Canada. What is the situation with the flooding in BC and what's happening at the border with the U.S.?
Well, I was just recently in discussions with colleagues in BC. And as far as the weather, there's been some letting up. Some of the rivers are subsiding a bit. But this was, in some areas, one of these, once in 100 years events. At the border itself, just because of the nature of the emergency, Canadians are being allowed by Canadian officials to return back home across the border without being subjected to COVID restrictions. A lot of the actual problem in the flooding actually comes from some of these giant pumping stations on the U.S. side, which Canada has had some concern about in the past, and their ability to keep up. There are also, as being recognized with cross-border towns, these are people who know each other right on the border. Everybody is suffering. It's an extreme situation. Some of the highways have started opening up again, but this is a very, very bad situation for British Columbia.
All right, sir. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on that situation. Let's jump into the Trilateral Summit's discussion on the proposed tax credit on EV vehicles. What is it and why is it a challenge for Canadian manufacturers?
Well, it is a challenge, Nima, and for this reason, the recent infrastructure bill that, Canadians who've been kind of following this across the border that President Biden got through included approval for this tax credit for electric vehicles up to $12,500, depending on your vehicle and depending on your income. And it's actually retroactive. It goes back in some cases as far as 2010 if you purchased a vehicle there. But the problem is it only applies to American-made vehicles. And that's a huge impact on Canada because if Americans get the choice of buying a similar vehicle, but for possibly up to $12,500 less, we know which way they're going to go. So it's a big problem for the Canadian auto manufacturing sector.
Another developing issue we have to watch. What were some of the other discussion topics at the Three Amigos Summit, sir?
Well, the other topics also created difficulties. I know the Prime Minister is putting on a good face, and he needs to. And I can honestly say I feel a bit sorry for him because he had virtually no cards to deal coming into this Amigos Summit. Primarily, the real driving thing politically is the fact that President Biden is down so drastically in the polls. And it's looking very drastic also for Democrats coming up to the midterms next year. So President Biden will be doing everything possible to make sure every possible U.S. job is going to be preserved. And that's what creates the problem. The other area they were discussing, they want to know between the three countries, what can they do related to China, some of the challenges there. Again, Canada is offside in the U.S. view because Canada has not yet made a declaration on Huawei. and should they be allowed to operate in Canada? The US, of course, has banned Huawei. So on almost every issue, I mean, like I said, I feel sorry for the Prime Minister. He has no cards to deal with. Every issue is political vis-a-vis the United States, and we're offside on just about every one.
On the topic of China, we know that Canada recently started trade talks with the ASEAN bloc. So what is the situation there currently, and how will it affect our connection with China?
Well, it's a great offside for us. And I don't mean offside as in hockey, but I mean it's to the side. It can be an arrangement which allows us greater trade cooperation with a number of other Asian countries that can hopefully, if we take a firmer view against what's going on in China in a number of areas, China will retaliate. And by having enhanced trade agreements with other countries in the region, it can kind of offset. It can be a bit of a default position for trouble that we are going to run into with China if the government decides to take a firm view either on the Huawei issue or on their related issues, human rights issues, situation that's going on in northern China, and those type of situations.
All right, the Honorable Stockwell Day. Always great having you on Forum Daily, sir. Thank you again for your time today.
Thanks, good to be with you.
We'll be right back after the break with a look at stories from around the world as Austria announces another nationwide lockdown. We'll take a deeper look into that story and more after the break. Kyle Rittenhouse has been acquitted of all charges after pleading self-defense in deadly shootings in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The jury came back with a verdict after nearly 3.5 days of deliberation. 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse was charged with homicide, attempted homicide, and reckless endangerment. This was for killing 2 men and wounding a third with a semi-automatic rifle. The shootings took place during a night of protests over police violence against Black people in the summer of 2020. Mr. Rittenhouse is white, as were the shooting victims, and the jury appeared to be overwhelmingly white as well. New COVID-19 infections have hit a pandemic record in Austria. This is where Chancellor Alexander Schellenberg is putting the country into a national lockdown starting Monday. Progress will be assessed after 10 days, and if virus cases have not gone down enough, the lockdown can be extended to a maximum of 20 days. There are reports that Austria will make vaccinations mandatory as of February 1st. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that he would repeal the controversial agriculture laws that sparked year-long protests from tens of thousands of farmers and posed a significant challenge to his administration. Farmers form one of India's most influential voting blocs. Mr. Modi's surprise decision on Friday came ahead of elections early next year in key states like Uttar Pradesh and Punjab, which are significant agricultural producers and where his Bharatiya Janata Party is eager to shore up its support. The UN Human Rights Office is now calling for an investigation into full transparency into Chinese tennis player Peng Shuai's allegation of sexual assault. This as China's foreign ministry insists it wasn't aware of the controversy surrounding Ms. Peng. She disappeared after making an accusation against a former top official 2 weeks ago. The head of the Women's Tennis Association doesn't believe that an email allegedly from Ms. Peng saying she was safe and that the allegation was untrue was actually from her. South Korean officials say fighter jets had to be scrambled in order to respond to a group of Russian and Chinese warplanes that entered its air buffer zone unannounced. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said it detected 7 Russian and 2 Chinese military aircraft. This was in the country's air defense identification zone off its eastern coast earlier today. The move is likely to heighten tensions in the region, which are already sky high. The British government says it intends to ban the Palestinian militant group Hamas as a terrorist organization. The military wing of Hamas has been outlawed in the UK since 2001, but the organization as a whole is not proscribed. Home Secretary Priti Patel said on Twitter that she had, quote, acted to proscribe Hamas in its entirety. A ban must be approved by Parliament. It would make it illegal in Britain to be a member of Hamas or to express support for it. Israel, the US, and the European Union consider it a terrorist group. When the coronavirus first emerged last year, health officials feared the pandemic would sweep across Africa, killing millions and destroying the continent's fragile health systems. Although it is unclear what COVID-19's ultimate toll will be, that catastrophic scenario has yet to materialize. And despite the fact that fewer than 6% of people on the continent are vaccinated, Africa appears to be one of the least affected places, according to the World Health Organization's data. Some scientists say Africa's younger population, in addition to their lower rates of urbanization, may have spared it the more lethal effects the virus has had elsewhere. Polish authorities say there are no more migrants camping along the Belarus side of the European Union's eastern border. But it says attempts at illegally crossing into the bloc's territory are continuing and becoming more aggressive. Hundreds of Iraqis were flown back home on Thursday from Belarus. Still, many migrants hoping to reach European soil remained Friday in a heated warehouse that Belarus recently made available near the border. They had been camping in a cold and wet forest since November 8th. The company formerly known as Facebook is staring down new troubles. An investigation has been launched in the United States, probing Meta's practices with teens and young adults when it comes to Instagram. The investigation is led by a bipartisan coalition of attorneys general from 8 states. An 89-year-old man has earned his PhD in physics, proving that you're never too old to follow your dreams. Manfred Steiner is a teenager, or was a teenager in Vienna when he became inspired to become a physicist after reading about Albert Einstein and Max Planck. All right, that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you could always visit our website. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.